to a studio that would buy it. So, like you said, that was Alan Bollinger who was shooting that stuff at the behest of Peter to be able to do that stuff. And there's a little bit, I have to say, there's a oh God, no, I'm getting this confused with another reel. Sorry. Forget it. I thought there was some Dan Arden stuff in there, but I don't think there is.
No, this is separate from that.
There's a reel that pre-existed this, which was made by the same ad group, and it's like a 6-minute version of this, but it's more making of, and it actually came out. God, I can't remember now. I was just looking at the thing a few minutes ago, and it was used to sell oh God, for international distributors and for promotional partners and potential merchandise and all that kind of things that you have to do to support a movie. New Line created a 6-minute presentation piece that is kind of a super version of this that was never seen by the public. It's very similar. It had the same narrator and all that kind of stuff. And I think some of Dan Arden's stuff was in that. And this is kind of like the mini version of that. So in some ways, there's a 26-minute reel, then there was the 6-minute sort of promotional reel, and then finally there was this 2-minute or 1 minute 45 second, 1 minute 45 second internet piece that went to the public.
Well, you won't believe what we found in our archives this weekend. Here is that 6-minute reel.
Oh my God.
That has never been released to the public.
Yeah.
And it was edited for Show West, which was an exhibitor relation conference.
Yes. Yeah, you remember this, Ordesky?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's Dan Arden's footage. There's Dan's stuff.
Yeah.
And you couldn't release this to the public because it had Led Zeppelin, and it had Star Wars, and the music. I don't know if you hear the music we're playing, but it's got like Last of the Mohicans and and Rocketeer and all sorts of other stuff with it. But it was oh my God. That this was interesting enough. This thing, because I had a private copy of this when I wanted to bring people on the show, and before there was anything to show them, even before this before the 2-minute internet trailer, to convince people to come on the show, I would show them this promo. Because it seems strange, like convince someone to work on Lord of the Rings, but remember, this is a long time ago, and some people really thought it wasn't going to work, or that it was a long shot, or and so I would sit people down and show this to them and go, okay, come to the other side of this and tell me these people don't have a shot of actually making this thing work. And it was the ultimate recruiting tool.
I mean, we were definitely lucky that if you think about the months, like Mark was saying, we're about a third of the way, just under halfway done. We hadn't gotten halfway done yet, but because of what the different units were doing, we actually had a nice combination of footage to give you the scope of the series. That was quite a blessing that we were just able to pull all that off.
So a lot of this footage was for the original pitch reel to get the studio on board.
Yeah,
correct.
When we say footage, we mean like if you see Peter in a white shirt, right?
Or if you see John talking right there, that's from the pitch reel.
Those are from the pitch reel.
Yeah. And what's amazing about this copy you have is it doesn't have anybody's name on it.
Yeah,
because they were all burn-ins with names.
You maybe should turn it off now. I wonder what kind of copyright laws you're breaking.
Wow. How'd you get a clean copy of that? I don't have a clean copy.
Who do you know at the NSA, Justin?
Well, the OneRing.net had many spies, as you guys well know. And Gordon, this is a great opportunity to bring you in the conversation because we had a wonderful relationship with you and New Line Legal Department about the various digital efforts. Do you remember how this teaser trailer came about as a digital exclusive for Apple Trailers?
Well, it's the unique and great thing about that. It was pretty much the first time that such an early piece had been put out for something that wasn't an established franchise. And God, 20 years ago, studios used to take legal action against fans for putting up an image of anything. It just wasn't done. So the great thing with the One Ring and the other fan sites is, we were able with, and Mark Ordesky, thank you, and Peter And Richard, we were able to lobby our legal department and our licensing department to be permitted to engage with the fans and actually share materials and allow them to share them online. At the time, I remember Star Trek had been taking legal action and shutting down fan sites for years at that point for posting any images. Everyone wanted people to come to their own, their owned and operated websites. But this was the beginning. I mean, I'm not saying it's the beginning of social media. It's the beginning of embracing fandom. And we developed certainly a really great relationship. I remember I loved working with you guys, and I really loved the fans. And we were doing it so early. A lot of people weren't really much outside of the fandom. A lot of people weren't paying attention to the property until this break happened. And the great thing of Peter and the team permitting this to happen in the studio is that it really did, as Richard mentioned, it changed the velocity and the tone of the fan response, because until then it had been, it did have a potential dark leaning from the fandom. People thought that first, people didn't want necessarily to see a film version being done, only because they didn't think it could be done didn't think there could be justice done to the property. And then seeing this and Peter's vision just changed the whole dynamic.
So it seems like a risk, right? If this is the first thing you're gonna show to the world, and with all of that anticipation and nervousness with fans, I mean, that rather than publish a polished trailer with completed effects, you've got early tests and Richard's work and workshop, testing different fat suits and tall suits and stuff. Like what was the strategy behind making this video, and why put this out first as the first thing people see?
Well, I'm just going to say one thing on that is, if you remember at the time, you guys and other spies were out there grabbing materials in New Zealand and posting stuff. So in order to set any kind of cohesive, thought around this project, this enabled materials to start to circulate that at least came from the filmmakers, as opposed to just having a lot of disparate elements that may be low grain, materials or other types of assets. So it really allowed the studio and Peter to have a stake put in the ground saying, this is a statement about our process and our work. And also the great thing, I mean, Richard always talks to this, but Peter was so good about saying very early to the fans that, this is not the definitive version of Lord of the Rings. This is my personal impression of what the film should be. And it really did a lot, I think, Mark, you can talk to this as well, to right set the filmmaker vision and set us on a proper journey that was really humble.
I have a question for you guys. Did you, I have to say, I don't remember there being anything like this before this in terms of getting a glimpse of, making of stuff within the structure of a trailer or a teaser. Now it's common, but I don't really remember it pre that. Did you guys, first question is, has there been a history of that with other folks? So you felt comfy about that? And then the second thing was just the timing itself ended up playing out beautifully. If you think to the future that a year later at Cannes, we then show a 20-minute reel to the international press, and not to mention the board of Time Warner in New York after that. But that, it all of a sudden felt like it was part of this beautiful grand plan. I don't remember there being a grand plan. Did it just play out that way, or what was the thinking for why in April? Why then?
Mark, you want to take that, or you want me to jump on?
Yeah, why don't you take it? Because I don't remember actually the significance of April.
Honestly, what I remember of this is that we had been discussing this for a long time. This was Peter's piece, and it was from, it was part of that pitch reel, and it was just so darn compelling. It was such a good piece. And everyone knew we didn't have anything else ready. There just wasn't anything. And the fans were so engaged. They were so interested. Normally, you can hide under a rock for a while, but there was so much going on in New Zealand, and the fans, they were getting materials and they were putting them out. And I know certainly from my standpoint, you don't want to get in a fight with your core market. I mean, the fans were everything to us, and we had to feed them.
Yeah.
Richard, how did you feel about, I mean, this is Weta's entry into the world stage, and the first thing we see is kind of incomplete work or in process work. I mean, how did you feel about this trailer?
I felt good about it because I have a very in-depth trust in anything that Peter feels is the right thing to do. And when he came to tell us that he wanted to do this, and could we muster together certain things for it, there was no question that it was the right thing to do. I hadn't seen any trailer like this at that point, so I was surprised to some degree that there was going to be this level of reveal. And it was really interesting hearing the feedback from fans around the world, how they had literally groomed through every millisecond of footage to look at what we were doing. And further to what Rick was saying, when the show went into turnaround and Peter went out into the world looking to get it picked up by another studio, and that was, that's a saga in its own right. There's a whole book just to be written about that month, because he would ring back home and let me know that he had had meetings with this person or this person, and we should keep the faith and we should keep going because it was all going to come right. But we had sent him off with a very large portfolio of 20 photo boards of the work that we had already done, both illustrative design, but also photographs of prosthetic tests, miniatures that we'd already built, dozens and dozens of maquettes. And then maybe foolishly, we also packed up for him and we custom made this aluminium box about this big, a meter long by half a meter tall, and we put 6 or 8 maquettes in that box. And the idea was that when he arrived at the studios, he would take the top off the box and show the sort of characters that were going to be in the world of Middle-earth. Sadly, on the very first destination, we think it was probably the luggage handlers dropped it off the conveyor belt. And when he opened it, all these beautiful maquettes that we had custom sculpted for him to go off around the world were all shattered. And he phoned me up and he said, what can I do? And I said, the best is just try and super glue it back together. So I have visions of him sitting in the hotel room the night before the big presentation. And they were literally just smashed. But the proof is in the pudding, because the materials were successful. The video that he shot was incredibly successful. And a month later, New Line Bob Shea saw his presentation, and the game was back on.
Wow. Jed, so this trailer came out 6 months into production. Were you involved? Had you been shooting Lord of the Rings by then?
Yeah, I had been. I've done a number of things, but the one that stands out in that video is I was, unbeknownst to Peter at the time, also a full-time member of the horse department. So I'd blagged my way into a job there by telling someone in the horse department that I was a pretty good rider and had done an audition. So I was one of the black riders, which was probably the most dangerous thing I've ever done on film. We couldn't see anything because the hoods came out to here, so we had no peripheral vision. Black gauze covering our faces. So at full gallop, we really couldn't see very clearly. And we would do this before every shot. So actually seeing it, we hadn't seen any footage of ourselves on horseback until this trailer came out. And we had no idea what it looked like, the coloration that Andrew Lesney and the cinematography team had put there, or any plate shots or anything behind it. But very exciting to suddenly see for the first time, even a glimpse of a tiny thing that you've done. if you've never been on screen, if you haven't been lucky enough to be an actor, it's a pretty incredible thing to see for the first time, something that you've actually done, which is just another day at work, up there for everybody to see, and to see what people actually said about it was very exciting.
Was this the first time you were able to kind of show your friends and family, like, this is what I've been working on, I haven't been able to talk about it?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of actors walking around Wellington at that time wanting to have conversations with people, but knowing under threat of death that they weren't allowed to. And so you'd have very weird conversations with people who were part of the film. And if anyone else came up, you'd go into kind of secret whispers and stop everything. And everyone knew, because there were Elijah and Billy Boyd and Dominic and various people were walking around Wellington. They all knew where they were shooting, but we weren't allowed to say. We were very careful not to talk about what we were shooting during the day. And I'm actually the worst. I find it very difficult not to say what we're doing. So I had to muzzle myself continuously.
That's just to be there in the middle of production. Mark, as executive producer, did you feel this, maybe this is a little early? I mean, you're not even done filming one of the films, and you guys want to put a trailer out?
No, I thought I would probably have been an advocate to go as early as possible. I subscribe to what Gordon was saying, that, you know, the best way is to tell your own story before someone else tells it. And having been in the room when that with Shay, when the long 26-minute version of the video was shown, I mean, what was genius about it was that Peter basically showed, here's how I'm going to do things that you can't imagine. It was all about think with hope, not with fear. Like, don't be afraid about how hobbits are going to look 3'6". Don't be afraid about Gollum. Don't be concerned about this, because I have come with answers. And that energy, that kind of can-do ingenuity, enthusiasm, and discipline in meeting with the New Line corporate culture, which was a bit of a kind of this wonderful kind of rebel culture by Hollywood standards anyway. This, as far as I was concerned, the sooner those two sets of energies could get out to fans, the better. So I thought it was great.
Yeah, the fans responded to it. I mean, it basically quelled most fears, and it was like everyone was like, they're doing it. They did it. But I'm curious, Michael, Pellerin, you had worked on behind the scenes features and other documentaries. Did you feel when you showed up and started doing the appendices that there was something more at play, and this was a higher caliber production than you had seen before? Was there any kind of tells?
Well, I mean, you know, I had before I became involved, I had a lot of friends who were involved with the production, and so I was a little more privy than your average, you know, person. So was already seeing, you know, I was very, you know, like typical, you know, the typical fan. We're all both excited and afraid of what it might be. It, you know, it could be the most amazing thing, or it could be an embarrassment. And what is it, you know? But you know, it was what got me, and it's to what you know, Mark and Gordon were saying, is that I love the fact that the filmmaker was pretty fearless and was showing basically like here's the magic trick before it becomes the magic on stage. Trust me. And then the glimpses you saw were so like literally. No, do they match everyone's imagination? Of course not. They can't. But they were so right on. Like, you know, we saw the characters, and you saw the look of the film, and it just, every time they showed a new image, and I'm thinking about both that 6-minute promo reel and the trailer, you just saw it, and you got this chill that, oh my God, they're actually going to pull this off. I'll never forget reading the works in progress screenplays for the first time, or seeing footage or work in progress, and just getting that chill of, oh my God, this is actually going to happen. I've been dreaming about this since I was a kid, and it's going to become a reality. And what I think is really also amazing about it was, so in terms of like, you know, I was hooked pretty early on, because I could see where they were going, and they were, you know, kind enough to share, you know, with me, and that was amazing. It was a lot of full disclosure. And I was on board. I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. I can actually devote a good chunk of my life to this thing because I think it will be something, amazing. And, I think that got telegraphed to audiences. I think not only fans, but what's amazing about, because this ultimately is about marketing the publicity of a film, that we forget looking back, because it was 20 years ago, is this was quite original stuff. Like you asked, had anybody really shown the making of before a film, not to such a wide degree to such a huge audience? No, that was really unprecedented. But it didn't stop there. I mean, Gordon kept putting out little videos regularly. He kept feeding and feeding and feeding. So it wasn't just this, it kept going and going and going. And what happened because of that is it energized the fans, but by energizing the fans, it made the film itself part of the larger public discourse. So everyone was talking about it. So it was almost like, if you get that much energy all the way along, and this is, books have been written about this. It was brilliant strategy that people are talking about it, fans are talking about it, it starts to permeate to fans' friends or family or parents or younger brothers or sisters. Suddenly everyone's talking about it. Guess what? There's a good chance when that thing rolls out, if it's been in the public discourse this much, the people are going to show up, and now we take this for granted, like little videos and behind the scenes videos and like the blogs we did with Peter later on Kong and Hobbit and stuff like that. But this was extremely cutting edge. There was nothing like this in the marketplace at all. And we can forget now that we're so used to being fed, but back then all this was really, really, really totally new territory. And that was impressive. Walking into that, I knew I could do what I wanted to do with people who'd be receptive to it. You know what I mean? Because they were already doing stuff that was really, really challenging the format of what you could do with a movie.
Let's talk a little bit about the creative choices, especially for this trailer. I mean, you hired, I believe his name was Nick Tate, the voiceover guy from Jurassic Park. And he had the tone of that voice. He was the first guy in this project to say the Ringverse, and it sold everybody. I mean, people even today were commenting that they were getting goosebumps hearing the Ringverse, one ring to rule them all, by Nick Tate, the professional voiceover. But Richard, you were saying that you were asked to find some footage and things to show. What were kind of the qualifiers that you wanted to show to fans? Was there any concerns that the things you were about to show were too fantastical, too early?
No, I wasn't concerned about that, because we very quickly understood the vernacular in which Peter wanted to make this film. And of course, we had Alan and John with us and leading us creatively. So I felt confident that the things that we had designed and sculpted at that point would sit well in the trailer. I obviously was anxious whether people would actually like the designs, because I knew that people would freeze frame on that table load of Urukai maquettes and other things that they saw from our world, and question our decision making. But I didn't feel any concern about what we put up out of the collection of things that we had done, because we have been very cautious not to break outside the confines of the world and the way that Peter described how he wanted the world to be, and really how we all wanted the world to be as well. Remember, there was a lot of fans and enthusiasts already within our group that knew very clearly what they wanted the visual look of the film to be. And that's been well documented over the last 20 years. But it was very exciting. Interestingly, something that, with respect to what Jed was saying, it was surprising how few people actually went to Russia's, or we call them Russia's dailies, each night, primarily probably because it was so exhausting after a full day of filming. Mark was there, Barry was there, Pete was there. With respect to our team, myself and Gino always sat in the same two seats for probably 3+ years. And Marjorie Hamlin, head of prosthetic makeup, and Dominique Till were there. And occasionally actors came along. It was really lovely the nights that Liv Tyler would come along, because she would be very vocal. And the whole room is pitch black as any cinema is, and we're watching just repeat after repeat after repeat of the footage on the screen. And suddenly down in the bottom corner of the cinema, where none of us even realized that Liv had snuck in, you would hear these incredible exclamations of excitement and wonder, and it was so uplifting. But we were privileged in many ways. I never thought about it at the time, but really privileged, because we were getting, Rick would be there every night, and he'd put on pizzas for us, and because often the rushes wouldn't finish till 9:30 at night time, and then of course you go back into the workshop and you're back up at whatever 3, 4 in the morning to start applying makeups. And I understand that a lot of people wouldn't want to be there, but when the trailer came out, that meant that a lot of people involved in the production had not actually seen anything from the production yet, because they hadn't had the privilege we had of being in the rushes. And that was a very, very special experience.
Mark or Rick, did you notice a morale boost in the wake of this video on set?
Well, Mark, do you first want to comment about back at New Line? I mean, what about let's not forget that, like, everybody said no and New Line said yes, and it was, a lot of money being spent, and a lot of we'll figure it out, trust us, and a lot of milestones that had to be put in place and then met. And so, I'm curious first, like, just back at New Line, how was the vibe there? Because you guys had a lot riding on it.
Sure, it's a similar dynamic to what Richard was speaking to, because you had a sort of a smaller team within New Line that was interfacing with the film and the filmmakers pretty consistently. And then you had like hundreds of other New Liners who didn't really get a chance to interface or to see much, who could only, and weren't even, to Jed's point, it wasn't even being talked about. I was paranoid about talking about anything about the film. So yeah, when it came out, all these New Liners who really, who had staked through the leadership of the company, had staked their own futures to the trilogy, suddenly saw with great excitement that the enthusiasm was not just well placed. It was exceeded. People were, it was beyond anyone's comprehension. There was no doubters. I mean, our home video department took that reel out and showed it to video wholesalers. Again, these are not easy people. And they were all completely gobsmacked by it. And then suddenly it's again, to the points made, suddenly people were talking. So yeah, it was a huge boost outside the inner circle of New Line that was dealing with the film and the filmmakers all the time.
Yeah, on our end, we crews working, and so something like this was great because it brought everybody together, but it also just got everybody that much more rejuvenated, because let's face it, it's a long slog, and that crew had already gone beyond the length of a normal movie already come April. So I think it really helped a lot. Later on, we started, editorially putting little, cuts together, and people, on set at the end of a week, they could see like some interesting things cut together, montages or whatever. But it was definitely, I think, great for the crews, plural, to not only get to see some stuff, to be reminded of the scope of what they're doing, and that they are doing a great job. And then also, just to be honest, just that their loved ones could see it. That's really, I think Jed and other people mentioned before, but just, the people that are willing to support you when you're working a long day and you come home tired, and maybe you're grumpy, or maybe you're just too tired to talk or whatever, all that, to finally be able to see, this is worth it. I think that probably went a long way for the crew.
So that's the creative and the human element. Gordon, what are the business metrics of that? Did you have a goal in mind of like, we need 1 million downloads of this to prove we're successful? What were some of the metrics behind the strategy of this video?
Well, let's be honest. There, at this point, we did not know what the response was going to be, and it ended up as we're fortunate that it ended up being kind of historic. I mean, I think we got 1.7 million downloads in 24 hours, which, now is like, oh, whatever. But then it was just ridiculous. Apple, I had gone to our dear friend Doug Warner, who was at that point ran Apple Trailers, and he was kind enough to help me craft a partnership with Akamai to get bandwidth throttled so that in case it went really well.
And Gordon for all that.
Yeah, I second that, Rick. That's Gordon would come down to the studios and he'd come and visit us in the workshop, and he'd actually explain to us the ecosystem of his world, which we had no understanding of at that point, and shared with us how he felt that we could best influence it and not run foul of it. And yeah, Gordon, I've never actually had the chance to acknowledge that, those words of wisdom that you would share with us from time to time, and they were well heeded and much appreciated. It's nice to be able to acknowledge that now.
The fans agree with all of you. In fact, we had a staff email going on this morning, and the owners of the OneRing.net wanted to send their appreciation and just, Gordon, we've always felt that you deserved all the awards for the marketing work. And I mean, did you receive any professional acknowledgement for the marketing strategy behind Lord of the Rings?
Well, it's a team effort. I mean, and also at the end of the day, it's the people on this phone. It's Peter, and Richard. It's the creative. Mm-hmm. Without the great work of incredible artists, and I'll say the greatest thing about this is we actually got to show stuff and dig into, because a lot of times then you didn't go a lot behind the scenes because it wasn't that thrilling. But this was, I mean, creating fantasy that worked was absolutely thrilling. And I think the fans' passion for it did eventually trigger a second market for the film. It expanded the interest, which then triggered things like promotional partners. I mean, honestly, we had Burger King. That was the goofiest promotional partner. But hey, it worked. It was wonderful.
We bought all the mugs that glow from the bottom.
Yeah.
As did we all.
Yeah.
So in the wake of the release of this, Richard, we were going through our archives and we found many solicitations for work. Like, are you a visual effects artist? Come to New Zealand and work on this. We need bodies. Like, after this trailer, were you inundated with resumes?
Well, it's interesting because I can't. It was either Jed or Rick said earlier on. It was you, Rick, that when this movie was when we first started on it, there was only a team of 5 of us in the workshop. But of course, we knew that we needed to grow our team quickly. And at that point, I had predicted that we'd need to bring in people from overseas with expertise. We ultimately did the film almost entirely with a Kiwi crew, with only 1/8 of that crew having ever worked on a film or TV show before. So, you know, a big training camp. But we tried to find people out in the world, and we simply couldn't. There was doubt. Now this is Weta Digital's ad that I think was in Cinefix.
Yes.
We put out our own for Weta Workshop, and Weta Digital had probably 60-70% of their crew came in from around the world. We found 1 or 2 people, and ultimately Gina Acevedo ended up staying with us for the next 25 years, which is lovely, and has become a true blue Kiwi bloke. I just tell you a lovely quick side story. About 2 years ago, I was up in my office working, and I was asked if I could go down to meet a family in the Weta Cave, which is our little tourism offering. And I said, sure, I go say hello. And I go downstairs, and the family was Noel Edmonds, the famous British television presenter, much loved in the UK and New Zealand. And he introduced himself, and his wife and son were with him, really wonderful people. And he pulls out a letter in front of his wife, and it is a letter that I had written 20 plus years ago to her, inviting her, because I had met her at the very first LA makeup convention that had ever been, where I took 5 of our team up there to go and meet Dick Smith and take part in this makeup convention. And makeup artists had come in from all over the world, and at that makeup convention, I invited this young woman called Liz Davies to come and join us. And I wrote her a letter a week after the makeup convention confirming that we had a position for her should she wish to come back. Anyway, jump forward 20 plus years, and Noel pulls this letter out of his bag. She didn't even know that he knew that she had it. And he had hidden this letter since they had been married, waiting for this moment, and revealed that to her that he had kept this letter, and I'd made this job offer that she sadly had turned down, and we were turned down by almost everyone, and we didn't need any more crew when the trailer came out because we were already fully crewed up. But when the trailer came back, very graciously and very humbly, a number of people which we had pursued to try and get them to come to New Zealand actually wrote to me to acknowledge that maybe they should have taken me more seriously. Because I actually flew up to LA with my wife to go and actually try and find people. And luckily some, Gino and Nori Honda and others came down, but very few did. And so it was interesting when the trailer came out.
Yeah, so as fans, we obsess over everything, right? So it was always a competition, like watching the numbers and the downloads go up. And then when they announced that 1.7 million downloads in the first day had surpassed Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace trailers for daily downloads, it was officially Lord of the Rings was more popular than Star Wars. And Jed, like, you were in the middle, you were on set. Now you were more popular than Star Wars. Did that impact your standing in the community?
No, not really. Not in New Zealand. Unless you're an All Black, you're not really anyone here. But it did really inspire the people in the horse department, because I was the only actor actually employed by the horse department. The rest were all equestrians, and so for them working on a film, it was a job that they got paid better than riding horses at the track. But until they saw this trailer, they really had no idea about what kind of a big deal they were a part of. With the horse department, we'd be up at 3 in the morning feeding the horses, and at 10 at night feeding them at night. And it was just a job riding horses during the day. Or we were treated a bit more specially than you would be at the track. But for them to actually see this and realize that they were part of something bigger than just being on a horse, that was pretty exciting. I remember us all being crammed around somebody's tiny little computer with dial-up. It took about an hour and a half or 2 hours just to even see the trailer, with 14 or 15 riders trying to cram in and see it. And for them, it was a huge motivational thing to realize that the work they were doing was actually bigger than just being in the mucking out a stable every day and having to get a sore ass, if you know what I mean. It was a huge thing for them.
Gordon, so, you know, the fan trailer came out, and you saw the response and the downloads. Did it help your job internally? Like, you know, to that, you know, you were kind of focused on the fans and supporting the fans and give the fans what they want because they're going to take it anyway. Did this kind of help solidify your strategy to engage the fans and bring us along for the ride?
Yes, it validated so many things, but certainly the greatest thing is it was, because it was acknowledged, it did so much for just solidifying the film. And really it helped me with the fans, but what it really helped is get the film and making people realize that it was something that they should pay attention to. I mean, we had articles in places like the New York Times and other areas that other executives, that's what they pay attention to. So, and it was great that, you know, that it validated Peter's work. That was the most important thing.
So looking forward toward, you know, Michael and Rick brought up the Cannes footage a year later. I mean, you know, you guys invited us and a few other fan sites to Cannes to see that first footage with the troll. I mean, that's an unheard of thing then, and it's an unheard of thing now.
Hi, Tanya.
I mean,
She's too shy. She's snuck out. We've got a Pukeko board meeting, and she's coming to chase me up and get me off the phone. But I tried to convince her to come and say hello, but she was too shy.
Yeah, so, I just got a glimpse. I wasn't going to let her out of the room.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, well, I was just saying that, you know, as going through the archives, I'll show you guys this real quick. Do you recognize this photo, Gordon?
No.
That was one of the first legal threats we got from New Line Cinema's legal department. That is a picture Ian McKellen took in costume of his shadow.
Wow.
And that we got that a few days before this trailer, and boy, did the lawyers come after us real quick.
We had it was nice. We were able, like also Judd Funk, who is one of our BA legals. It was great that the legal department, I would constantly request, and Mark and the whole team was really helpful in being able to talk people down. So generally what would happen is I would get a call saying, okay, you want to do it this way, stop them. And I would call up and beg you or beg anyone, and I would reach out and contact any site, any fan, anyone, and just have a dialogue. And you know, the thing is, it's got to be done with love, because all people just love the property. You know, nobody's doing anything bad. It's just they care. So it's a little bit of horse trading of saying, if you do this, we can do this. We'll find a way to get you something. And that's the nice thing. That's how you develop a relationship that lasts 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how do we go? I've always been curious, how from your perspective, from your side, how did, you know, the fan site, the One Ring, go from getting legal threats over a photo of a shadow to being invited to Cannes? I mean, was there a broad strategy that you were just kind of executing of like, let's all play nice, or, you know, it's a big leap to provide that access?
I think it comes down to passion. You know, the nice thing is, yes, there were things that our legal department and, you know, for copyright and other things, they need to show a chain of trying to protect the material so it doesn't go into lapse into something. But really, it's the fans are passionate, and I was an advocate for the fans, along with every other person who's on this chat, and Peter and the team. And it was always done with humble inquiry and care and proper attention. So I think a strategy based in love is the best you can have.
I'm curious to hear from Richard, Mark. Actually, I think everybody was at Cannes when we first met you. I wasn't there, but Calasuri, Chris Parada was there, Michael, a few of the founders of the OneRing.net, and I'm curious to like get your reaction of like when we finally the worlds collided, right? Like the behind the scenes, the professional crew, and now the fans. And we're all commingling for the first time in this, castle type area at the after party. I mean,
shouldn't we be talking about this in a year?
Yeah, like you're kind of eating into your
kinda,
20th anniversary of Cannes show, Justin.
If you're trying to stick with your 20-year out, Justin, you might need to delay us a year. We can get into it then.
I've got another year and a half of content going. 3 years of content, actually. Well, it all started with this trailer. I really feel that this teaser trailer was more for the fans than for anything else, than for broad marketing appeal or anything. And again, we went through the archives and found this headline that summed up everything.
No.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That reminds me a quick anecdote about this, like the realization of like this thing was going to get real and it was actually going to be the Lord of the Rings and it was going to be on film. The first time I saw this trailer, I was in a recording session, or it was a mix with Roy Disney. I was working on a project with him, and different show, not for Disney project. And it just for those, I'm sure everyone knows this, but to remind you, the Lord of the Rings was originally at Miramax, which was a parent's company was Disney. So it was technically a Disney film once upon a time. And we're doing this mix, and Roy could see I was looking at something that wasn't work. I wasn't present. And he goes, finally came over and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Because it's not this show." And I said, "They're about to run the Lord of the Rings trailer for the first time." And he went, "Well, let's watch it." So we sat down, we stopped the session, everyone gathered around and watched the thing. And 2 minutes later, he just went, "Wow, good on them. They really are going to pull it off. They're going to pull it off." And I said, "Really, what do you think?" He said, "Yeah, it found the right home. We weren't the right place. Disney would have made it a company film. This is more of a single visionary thing. And they're going to pull it off." And I thought, wow, this is such a moment where one of the guys running the studio who lost the project sees it go all the way around and watches this trailer and then goes, "Yeah, you know what? It found the right home. It's going to be great. It's fantastic." And, that's what, Gordon, you were saying, other people in the industry acknowledging this was a big validation. I saw that firsthand right in the room, like one of the people that lost it saying, "Yeah, this is actually, they're going to do it. They're going to achieve this," which most people thought was impossible.
The other interesting thing about this video being the first trailer is I don't think you guys had announced the appendices yet, and the home video release became just as much about the Pellerin's work and the appendices, and you kind of set that up from day one with this video. You said this is as much about the process of making Lord of the Rings as it is Lord of the Rings. And Richard, you've interacted with fans at Comic-Con every year for 20 years. I mean, you see everybody knows your name and responds to Mark, everybody, you're all the fans know you and love you. And this trailer kind of showed it's just as much about the journey as the final product.
Yeah, it's interesting today, and it has been for maybe the last 10 years, the most commonly said thing to me by people I meet at conventions is, I love the Lord of the Rings movies, I still do, but the thing that I now so significantly love is the behind the scenes, the appendices, because they've inspired me to do this, or they got me through that, or I tend to apologize for yelling at them via the video screen, because I used to be so nervous when I was being filmed by Michael, so I'd just yell at the microphone. but it's a good point that they make, which is what Michael and his team did, obviously under Peter's leadership, because Peter inspired the desire to put those appendices out there, was to unpack everything about everything, the whole process. You know, one of the things that we haven't acknowledged in this little video is in that trailer, the world got to see the first things that Weta Digital were doing. There was unbelievably groundbreaking stuff. And if you think about Peter's mentality around that, he left large holes in his movie that he was confident that one day in the future, Weta Digital would invent the technology to fill the holes. Right? He didn't shoot a double for Gollum. He didn't shoot cover in case he couldn't get the massive armies to work. He was so confident that they would be able to achieve it, and achieve it they did. And for the first time ever, the world's fan base saw that in this trailer, where they saw the incredible digital technology that Joe Letteri and his team were doing over at Weta Digital. And that was super exciting as well. And then Michael, of course, just unpacked all of that, every single element of the making of this, whether it be with Jed's horse team or what we were doing in the workshop, or what the camera department, the acting, the actors and so on, the props department, costuming. It was all so beautifully unfolded for the world. And that has been a delightful thing to know that we were part of, as much as the film overall.
Yeah, I think Peter was always great about, even from the very beginning, like, how do we figure this out and let's document it. I mean, you know, before Michael, before Costa, I mean, Peter was documenting stuff, right? So like there was already this DNA, like everything that everybody's talking about on this call, Peter built DNA just by the way he looked at the world, the way he approached his filmmaking, the way he approached his storytelling, the way he approached his interaction with Richard. That was all, you know, all that hard work that those guys had done for years before, from Meet the Feebles to Forgotten Silver, whatever it may have been, right? We all benefited from that, because that basically became kind of the DNA of this show. And it's why it's one of the reasons why great companies are great. They have a culture that's so strong in a way of doing things that people can step in, insert, turn on the machine, and then continue on. And I think that's, you know, they were all doing that, you know, before anybody showed up. So I think that's one of the reasons why all this stuff is there, is because of those early interactions that Peter had.
Yeah. And it stems from Peter, and he was very keen to document this thing, whether it succeeded or not. You know, it'll be a documentary about something that's incredibly successful. It'll be, you know, something that fell on its face, you know, that didn't happen, like the original, Lost in La Mancha documentary. But the thing with the appendices and all that, I have to say, throw it back at these guys, that could never have happened if everyone wasn't just so keen. I mean, starting with Peter, guys like Mark and Gordon at New Line, Richard and the other heads of department that jumped in to help, that jumped into, you know, I felt like I had real teammates, and, you know, and Rick was like, you know, a brother in arms all the way through it. And Jed, as we know for many years, you're one of the best friends behind the scenes could ever have. and so it, you know, that thing existed because you had a lot of people very keen to make it happen and very on board, because that never could have worked, that kind of behind the scenes thing, if you didn't have all the various people in the ecosphere of the film being really excited and participatory and helpful in making it happen. It just could never come together. And we just had that. Like, it was like you felt so supported from every side, which is wonderful.
But I think this teaser would have been wonderful if it had just been cut footage. People would have been excited, sure. But I think what made it special was the intercutting of that early footage and actually seeing the filmmaker like talking about it. To me, that's really what made it kind of, another cut above. You know, if New Line had just cut something together with the footage that we'd shot, we had a lot of different stuff they could have cut with, as you saw some of it in there. But I think the fact that you guys included the other stuff and included Peter, you know, and that Peter was gung ho about that, you know, that behind the scenes, I think, you know, that really started something special.
Well, it was also going to be a journey. Remember, it was going to be 3 films released consecutively over 3 years. So having something which wasn't just footage from the movie that said, okay, here's what we're doing and trust us and look what we're going to do and how we're going to achieve it. It gave you not only confidence in the first film, but it was going to follow through all the way through for, you know, 3 years, you know, by letting you in on process, you know.
Just a quick thing, in the big rig, Richard, was that Sasha?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, it was.
So just to give you an idea how great Richard's organization is, Sasha also is one of the co-creators of the typeface for all the Lord of the Rings typography, right? It's all from Sasha. You know, she was half of that equation. Sasha was an early stage artist. The fact that Richard had these people that like may start off just drawing something, all of a sudden they're putting mud on Uruk-hai, or they're, like in Sasha's case, there she is in this rig. You know, that went such a long way into making these movies so special and so successful. You know, was what Richard was even doing within his organization at Weta. It's a very unique thing that I wish more people.
Yeah, I think almost everybody ended up doing a stint on set so that they felt like they were part of the whole experience. As you acknowledged, Sasha was one of our designers, but volunteered to be one of the big rig wearers, which was dangerous. You know, she was up on very high stilts operating this large suit, but she was all up for it, and you know, willingly gave it her all, as everyone did. And it was we were just extraordinarily fortunate to be surrounded by such a group of people, and of course many of them still with us today, which is lovely. Hey Justin, I'm going to have to bow out. I'm getting text after text from my assistant Ree to say you've got a board call and you're now 15 minutes late. So I'll say goodbye to everyone out there. Lovely talking to everyone, and of course to all my friends and colleagues here on the screens. What a treat to see everyone. And
take care, Richard.
Yeah, love and blessings to all as we get through this. And I look forward to the next time we all catch up at Comic-Con or somewhere similar.
Yeah, my COVID's kicking in again, so I'm going to go lie down. But thanks, everybody.
Take care, Rick.
See you, Rick.
Yeah,
Good
just
stuff.
15 minutes late as well, but it was well worth it. And good to see you, Rick.
Bye, guys. Lots of love to everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, love to everyone.
Guys.
Thank you all for joining in here. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate the openness. And I guess as we wrap up, I just want to get your final thoughts. This, from the fan perspective, this trailer was the confirmation and the validation that we all needed and we all craved. And this was the point. This was the turning point for fandom. Be like, okay, my nerves were a little unfounded. You know, it's in good hands. But by the way, I wanted to show you guys this. This is the first swag the OneRing.net ever made for a convention. You know what those are? Those are stress balls.
Wow.
So our first swag before t-shirts, before anything, was a stress ball that fans could squeeze. So you know, our nerves were high. So I want to get some final thoughts. Maybe start with you, Jed. You know, was this the point, now that it was public, that you had the confidence and you kind of saw the path?
Yeah, look, I've always been a huge fan of Richard and Peter and his whole team, and I always had faith. But I think for the country of New Zealand as a whole, it was a validation that all of the hard work they were seeing people were doing was worth it. But yeah, it was validation for me too, as a fan of Tolkien's work, that we're on the right path. Not that you need any. When you're working on a film, everybody's working towards a common goal anyway, but it was really nice to be able to be part of something that the world got to see and understand that actually it was in safe hands, that these were the right people to be making the film, and it was going to be as good, if not better, than everybody hoped it would be. and just really cool to be part of it. I still pinch myself that I even got to be a part of these films, because I'm a fan of the books, I'm a fan of the work, and I call myself the lucky Kiwi. And from seeing this trailer onwards, I've always kind of felt like I was incredibly privileged to be a part of it. So yeah, it was a very cool moment, and it hasn't stopped. Thank you, everyone.
Mark, what did this the reaction to this video kind of validate all the decisions that you guys were making by the thousands?
I think I'm sort of on the same track with Jed. I mean, I was already a true believer, because I'd known Peter and a lot of the gang that were on the movie since sort of the mid to late 80s. So for me, and the love of the books, which came since I was a child. So this to me was simply an opportunity, which you're very lucky to get in your life, where two passions that are foundational, you get to play a part. And when that sort of thing happens, you just step forward, you don't doubt. And even though all movies are challenging and difficult at any given moment, but it's a privilege to even have a difficult moment on something that you care about deeply. So that was kind of my takeaway of it. So the trailer to me was like, I could never have imagined it being any different.
Michael, did this trailer set the tone and give you kind of a creative path for all the appendices?
I wouldn't say what it did do was funny, I haven't watched it in years and years and years. I just watched it. It actually still got to me. It still hooked me. I still got really affected by it, because even though it's a fairly, it's a simple, straightforward thing, it said, like something that I had always dreamed about since I was a kid, was seeing these books made into motion pictures. It was that moment where you go, this is really going to happen. They're really going to get there. And then you thought about all the scenes in the book, and you thought, oh my God, they're going to do that, and they're going to do that. And they did almost all of them. And did them well. And that right there, what that did for me is, if I love something, I can do my job. I can go do these great stories. I can't fake it. I can't sort of pretend. So I immediately knew, okay, I can actually do my job, because the people that made this cared about it so much and loved it so much that they're going to actually make something that's authentic. And if they've done that, then I can throw my whole life into it. So that's how it informed me. It was that moment I went, okay, this is going to be the Lord of the Rings on film for real, and therefore I can just throw my whole heart and soul into it. Watching it also reminds me of all the stories that we never got to tell. Yeah, because I don't look back at my stuff ever, and it just starts reminding me of all that maybe we'll tell someday. I don't know. It literally, I don't ever watch my own stuff, and I just saw that, and it started making me think about all this stuff. I'm like, God, someday maybe though, guys. Maybe.
and Gordon, again, everyone at the fan site, the onering.net, just wants to say thank you for putting this trailer together and just committing to the fans at such an early stage. And your efforts were appreciated throughout the years, and I really appreciate this conversation, and your thoughts on this trailer, kind of like you said, validating some expectations that you had.
Well, I think prior to this, fandom was seen as Star Wars, and the great thing is I think this situation validated fandom, and it started a whole a different way, certainly a different way of marketing, a different way of appreciating what fandom can bring. Certainly box office, licensing sales, other things, but it did create a different perception of the power of fandom.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the extra time with us today. We went a little over an hour, but this has been a wonderful conversation about this trailer. And again, we're still a year away from Cannes 20th anniversary. So I hope we can continue this dialogue amongst everybody here and on Twitter and everywhere else that you communicate with fans, because it's been a real pleasure. This and even our earlier conversation in November, getting an insight from your perspective and balancing that with the fan perspective on this just monumental achievement that was Lord of the Rings. So I really appreciate your time, guys, today.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Justin.
being here.
Thank you, Justin.
All right.
Good seeing you.
And
Good seeing all you guys.
See you,
Yeah.
Mark.
Good
See you, Michael.
All right.
See you, Gordon.
Take
See you
care.
next time.
everyone.
Cheers.
We'll see ya, and we'll play the trailer out for all the fans. Thank you for watching Torn Tuesday, and we'll see you next week.
Ka kite.
Wow.
Whew.
Nice. Nice.
Still goosebumps.
Yeah.
I know. 20 years on, and it's just like it was yesterday.
Well, also the three titles, Christmas 2001, Christmas 2002, Christmas 2003. It,
I know.
it just that right there, you go, oh my God, they're doing all